Hey folks, I'm back with Paul Craig Roberts this Saturday morning, post summit between Putin and Trump for Paul's analysis. What was the outcome, good or bad, and what does it say, set the stage for what's to come? Now, Paul, you say generally it was a good outcome, but there's two obstacles that have to be overcome first. And that is the removing NATO countries and missiles from Russia's border for Russia's security, not Ukraine's, but Russia's security, and also to dispense with the doctrine of hegemony, which means that we dominate the world, and that's a risk to Russia. And of course, that's reinforced by the military-industrial security complex. But you say the outcome was generally good, setting the stage for a more lasting peace. So the ceasefire wouldn't have done it. First, these other conditions have to be met before there could be real possibility of peace. Correct? Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good summation of it, Larry. We've almost finished the interview. Um, yesterday at the press conference, it looked like nothing had happened.
Right.
The the initial response, I think, of most everyone was it was all a dud. What was it about? Uh, and I went to bed wondering about it, and woke up early this morning and saw that actually some important things had happened. I've made some notes here. I'd like to run through them all just to put it all into context for the listeners, and then we can discuss about how likely it is that this fortuitous beginning develops in a good way. So what we're really asking is, what do we make of of the meeting? And yes, good results came of it. One is that Trump moved away from his demand for a ceasefire. You remember he had told everybody that he was going to really pressure Putin for a ceasefire. He told that to the European leaders. He said that publicly to the Americans. But actually, what came out of it, he says, it's more important to work toward a permanent peace than a ceasefire, which is seldom observed. So when he said that it's important to work toward a permanent peace, that seems to committing to addressing the root cause of the conflict that Putin keeps talking about. And that root cause, of course, is Russia's insecurity with NATO all over their frontiers,
Right.
all over the borders. Now, Putin said that the meeting marked a transition from confrontation and threats to dialogue. Well, that prospect alone makes the meeting worthwhile. So from these responses of Trump and Putin, um, it's very fortunate because in a world of nuclear weapons, the level of tension was becoming untenable. It was just too high.
Yeah.
So this is the good thing. Now, as you noted, for these hopes to be realized, there are two barriers must be recognized and overcome. And one is the neoconservative doctrine of American hegemony, and the other is the interest of the U.S. military security complex. Well, the doctrine of hegemony requires overcoming Russia in order to um, achieve Washington's unilateralism. So if you've got if you have a foreign policy doctrine that requires you to overcome countries who could serve as a check on your unilateralism, it's hard to make peace with them. So that doctrine, can it be repudiated? Or is it too institutionalized? It dates back, I think, to 1991, the Wolfowitz Doctrine. Is it so institutionalized in American foreign policy and way of thinking, the foreign policy community, that it can't be repudiated? Well, we have the same problem with the interest of the military security complex.
Yeah.
Uh, the budget of the armaments industry, of the Pentagon, the influence over Congress and the power uh, of the military security complex requires a major enemy. So Russia fulfills the role of enemy. So peace on equal terms with Russia takes away the enemy and the budget and influence of the military security complex declines.
Paul, as we've talked before, Trump seems to be making the right moves even with this. But as we've mentioned before, can even Trump overcome the grip of the military industrial security complex and the doctrine of hegemony? Because a lot of the people that instituted that are either still in government or still have influence of the people that are left over in government. So, I mean, it's so entrenched and there's so much writing on it in terms of people's careers and money
Yeah.
that even Trump overcome that and survive.
Yes, that's the question. Is this foreign policy doctrine and the economic power interests of the military security complex, are they too institutionalized for any president to do anything about? You remember now, we talked about it before, a long time ago, 1961, President Eisenhower warned us
Right.
that the military security complex was becoming a very powerful institutionalized force and was acquiring powers that it shouldn't have. So, and of course, let me give you an example of how the military security complex is institutionalized. It's not just in the thinking and in the doctrines. Nearly every American state has either a military base or an armaments manufacturer, a weapons manufacturer. So this gives the military security complex enormous clout in Congress. And of course, it has enormous clout with the governors
An
of the states.
example close to home, as I mentioned before, I live in Pennsylvania, not far from Scranton, and the ammunition plant in Scranton produces almost all of the shells for Ukraine. Huge contracts, huge money, huge support for it. So, how do you undo that with our senators and representatives who have to keep jobs in the area secure, et cetera, et cetera? So there's so many interests pulling at this, and what can he do? But I interrupted you. Go ahead, Paul.
No, it's a good point. And another point is that how can you do anything about either of these barriers if you don't acknowledge them?
Yeah,
There's no focus on the fact that the doctrine of hegemony and the interest of the military security complex are aligned against normalizing relations with Russia,
right.
or for that matter, China. So, my first point is that everyone has to become aware that these are barriers They're powerful, institutionalized barriers. And if that can become part of the awareness and discussion, there's some chance. If that's kept in the dark and they don't ever mention it, there's no chance. So let's ask the question, how helpful will the media be?
Exactly. I've been listening to Fox News because actually they're more in support of common sense generally and Trump's support, even though they have their own agenda, their own slants. But I was listening to their coverage last night and today, and it was all like Putin is wrong, he's a dictator, he's a pathological killer, this and that. Nothing about the security interests of Russia, the legitimate security interests. And as I've said before a number of times, compare it to the Cuban Missile Crisis when the then Soviet Union, Khrushchev, brought nuclear missiles 90 miles off our shore. We almost went to war with the Soviet Union over that security situation on our shores. And yet we've reversed it with Russia, and Russia isn't supposed to be concerned about it. And there's no mention of that on the media.
Yeah, that's right. So there'll be a lot of effort on the part of the neoconservatives and on the part of the military security complex to keep the media off the focus, to keep hostility toward Russia alive so that Trump cannot reach an accommodation.
Yeah.
We're seeing it already. You just described it, even on Fox News. So, and it's certainly not helpful. It's the wrong focus. It's the wrong focus um, to emphasize that, well, Putin wanted the meeting in order to show that he was no longer isolated.
Yeah.
And he could meet with President Trump just like Zelensky and Netanyahu. Well, of course, that's not Putin's motive. And what we need to understand is that the meeting between Trump and Putin, which had the two good results that I mentioned earlier, this meeting was totally fortuitous. It was an accident. How did it happen? Well, Trump had trapped himself. His 10-day threatened secondary sanctions, tariffs against India and other BRICS, it backfired in a big way. India canceled orders for our airplanes, moved closer to Russia. There was instability in the markets. Trump was faced with a deadline he set on himself to do something, the negative results of which he was already witnessing. He had to find a way out. This explains why a day or 2 days after he said, I don't want to meet with Putin, there's no point to it, he says, get me a meeting this week.
Yeah.
He had to meet with Putin before he had to put these tariffs in operation. And so the meeting was a way of getting himself out of the fix he had put himself in. So this was luck. This was fortuitous. This was not planned. You see, no one ever explained, oh, why did Trump suddenly
Right.
want this meeting so quick? It had to be before the 10 days were up. Well, so the outcome is we had good luck.
Right.
Now,
Explain
the opportunity to wind down this confrontation.
explain more about how the tariffs backfired.
Well, you never know because you never know how much of the news reports are correct.
Right.
Clearly, the Modi in India was very angry. he canceled India's order for the American jet aircraft. Um, he expressed real anger at the United States. Markets were getting in turmoil. What is this going to do to the oil market? The stock market, things were starting to get shaky. And Trump realized he had stepped on a rattlesnake. And how was he going to get out of it? And one way to get out of it was to have this meeting with Putin, because if they have a meeting, then he can remove the threat of sanctions in 10 days. So this was with just luck. Now, the opportunity to wind down a confrontation that's been going on for some time and that would most likely end in nuclear war. This opportunity is a luck. It's luck.
Yeah, and
It's
Paul, what you said was, if he just went for a ceasefire, as Trump originally stated, it wouldn't necessarily hold. Some of them haven't held. What they had to go for was a lasting peace, which involved the security of Russia and dismantling the doctrine of hegemony, at least make it less aggressive. So Trump made the right move in forgetting about an immediate ceasefire, which he was insisting on going into the meeting
yeah,
originally.
yeah. I think he listened to Putin. Now, can this lucky outcome be turned into a mutual security agreement? And as we've already said, it depends on the strength of the neoconservative doctrine of hegemony, and it depends on the willingness of the military security complex to accept lower sales, less profits.
And you've been saying that Putin's been looking for a mutual security agreement for years now and has been rejected.
That's right. And I think that say Putin's interest is not in ending the war in Ukraine. His interest is in a mutual security agreement, which requires getting NATO off of Russia's borders. And so whether this can be done depends on how strong these institutionalized forces are, the doctrine of hegemony and the financial, economic power interests of the military security complex. So we have to keep in mind that these are the obstacles. It's nothing Putin is doing, it's an obstacle. And that Trump is facing really powerful institutionalized forces. And even with the best of intentions, um, can he defeat those forces, win them over, uh, or are those forces going to keep the American people convinced that Russia is an enemy and Putin is after all of Europe and we have to stop them over there before they come over here, and
Yeah,
all of this patriotic gibberish
yeah.
that the military security complex and the neoconservatives will use to try to block a uh, good outcome.
Yeah,
So
Fox quoting Trump. Fox is, of course, supposedly quoting Trump that I'm quoting Putin that he said that he wants to take over all of Europe. I don't recall him ever saying that.
no, no, he's never said anything like that. What in the hell would he want it for? It's just a huge problem.
Yeah. Well, Paul, here's another question that keeps haunting me. Was Trump ignorant of the real issues here that Putin was finally able to present to him face to face, or until now was he aware of that, but merely ignoring them? In other words, did he have any real information about the true issues here, or was he just listening to these people around him, or did he know better to begin with?
I don't think he had any information of what Putin meant by the root causes, and I don't think any of his advisors did either. I don't think any of them
So do
had any
you,
idea, and I'm not sure they do.
so do you
I
think
think
during this
I
meeting?
think Trump got convinced um, by Putin that a ceasefire was not a road to peace. That's easy. I mean, when has one ever held?
Yeah. I mean, do you think during this meeting, face to face, it was the first time that Trump really heard and listened to Putin's side about the real underlying causes? And that's, what may change everything.
Yeah. You see, once Trump had to go to a meeting quickly. I mean, there wasn't any time for any preparation, but he had to go to a meeting quickly, and this meant that something good had to come out of it. And so he couldn't simply come out in confrontation with Putin's and say, well, he won't agree to a ceasefire. He's he's ruined the chances for peace, blah, blah. So he had to get out of that box as well. And the way he got out of that box was to say, okay, we have to move toward um, a, a general level of peace. See, that gives him plenty of time.
Yeah.
Uh, and we'll see if his people, the military security complex, the neoconservatives or the Europeans, will see if they succeed in again positioning Trump with a hostile attitude toward Russia.
Well, there's supposed to be a meeting soon at the White House, I guess, with Zelensky and others. So that'll be a follow-up meeting that's coming up fairly quickly, according to reports anyway.
I think it's Monday, isn't it? Trump meets with Zelensky Monday
Yeah.
in
Something.
Washington.
Yeah.
But you see, um, it's really not in Zelensky's hands. I mean, what can he do? If Trump and Putin decide to normalize relations, it goes far beyond the conflict in Ukraine. And I'm hoping that's what Putin has made Trump understand. And I think that when Trump says that the focus is on a more general kind of peace, that committed him to removing the root causes.
There's been a lot of talk even now about a land swap and Russia giving up the land it invaded, which is another misconception with the public. What really happened there, why he invaded that area, which is largely Russian ethnic, Russian speaking, Russian culture. They want to be Russians, and they're being attacked by the Ukraine administration that we put in power after a coup.
Yeah, in fact, he did not even invade Donbass.
Yeah.
He finally recognized the two independent republics. You know, the Russians had not even recognized those republics. But kind of at the last minute, he recognized that they were independent republics. And then that let them request legally in international law, request Russia's intervention to protect them from the Ukrainian army, which was poised to invade them. So the invasion was coming from the American trained and equipped Ukrainian army that was going to invade the two republics and reincorporate them into Ukraine. And Putin accepted the plea from the two republics to prevent that, to come to their aid. So he didn't even invade Donbass. He was asked in by the two republics to protect them from the invasion by Ukraine. Now, those are the facts. just the bare facts.
Which nobody hears about in the mainstream media. Nobody hears that.
Nobody hears it because it was all Zelensky is the good guy, Putin's the bad guy, and they're going to try to keep it that way. They're going to try to keep it that way to make it impossible for Trump to continue what was a very good start. But remember, this start wasn't intentional or planned. It was an accident.
Fortuitous accident, yeah.
Trump needed to get off the spot of enforcing his secondary tariffs.
Mm.
He couldn't just again change. So the meeting with Putin and the proclamation, okay, we're working toward a long-term peace, that removes that whole problem of terrorist threats because now they got to work together. So this gives the opposing powers plenty of time to derail it or to uh, put Trump in some other kind of box. And the real danger is that so many of his supporters are these really patriotic Americans, and they've been convinced that Russia's the enemy.
Right. Listening to the coverage of this reinforced the reality of how slanted the mainstream media is. Now, Fox at least gets some of the other side out in a lot of occasions, but on this and other things, they're right on the agenda, so they're part of the disinformation too. Now, I don't know if the anchors and the commentators believe the propaganda that they've been exposed to, or if they know better, which is a question I ask a lot. Can they really be that naive about what the truth really is? And you say it's the result of the last 50 years of indoctrination with the schools, the journalism schools, the law schools, lack of teaching American history, civics, et cetera, et cetera. It's all accumulated into this vast public ignorance.
Yeah, the vastness of ignorance is a good way of looking at the problem Trump faces, even if he can dispel his own.
Yeah. Yeah. How much does he really know? Yeah.
Yeah. Even if he can dispel his own ignorance, he's up against the ignorance of his supporters. And, the Americans have been conditioned to see Russia as an enemy since what, 1950?
Yeah.
75 years.
Yeah.
So people have born and died during this period. A 75-year lifespan covers the time that uh, Americans have been conditioned to view Russia as the enemy.
Like you say, the special interests, the moneyed interests need an enemy. So much of this, I keep thinking, it was so predicted by the novel 1984, George Orwell, who wrote that in 1946, right after the war, 1948, right after the war, because he saw which way this was heading. It was amazing how much he put into that novel that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you when you create an enemy for yourself, you're kind of stuck with it. And that's, I tried, and that's the problem. And of course, the military security complex probably does a lot of advertising.
Yeah. Yeah. Through
And
their,
the neoconservatives are most all of them are intellectuals, and they write for the media.
yeah.
They've all got columns or positions or posts.
And the tyranny of the printed word and the broadcast voice, where people assume it's authoritative, because they're on the air or they're in the newspaper. It's well known that people just assume authority and credibility because they're public in the public forum.
Yeah, I expect to see efforts to make Trump supporters believe that Trump has sold out Ukraine
That's
and
an interesting development as well.
given in to Putin and has now aligned America with Russia against Europe.
Another Russian hoax in the making.
Yeah, this this is what I expect from the neoconservatives, and the military security complexes will be delighted and will finance it. I mean, we'll probably have a couple of new think tanks spring up, explaining how Trump has sold out Europe, and and that Lindsey Graham and people like that will all start talking like that. And this is a real possibility. So, and I'm not sure the Russians understand uh, what they're up against.
Yeah, yeah.
Even with Trump's help, what the real situation is. I did notice that the Russians, one of their geopolitical think tanks, reproduced my column the other day when I said, "Can Putin pass the test?" So they're starting to learn that the situation is very difficult, and even if Trump sees the light and tries to do something for all the reasons we've discussed today, and there'll probably be others, he's really got his hands full. I mean, this is going to be the biggest, if Trump pursues it, this will be the biggest battle of any president in American history.
Good point. Good point to close on. And Paul, final word, final question. How soon do you think we'll know or have strong indications of which way this is going to go?
I think it depends on how the opponents to peace proceed. Will they make a upfront, real strong assault to try to kill it in its birth? Or will they let it play along and rely on all kinds of opportunities and kill it with the death of 1,000 cuts?
So one way or the other, they will finally, in the end, kill it.
That that's their intention.
And,
And it really depends on whether the kind of point of view that we're putting forward in this program penetrates the American consciousness
right.
and penetrates in the foreign policy community, at least enough of them that a debate starts.
Yeah.
Right now, there's no debate. It's all we got to get the Russians.
The Russians are coming.
They don't really understand that getting the Russians means getting yourself,
Yeah. Yeah.
because there's no way to get Russians without getting yourself in a world of nuclear weapons.
Well,
And what the real goal should be is to get rid of the nuclear weapons.
that's a whole other topic. That's we've discussed this before. By the grace of God or whatever, it hasn't happened yet. Thousands of nuclear weapons, multiple countries having them, by mistake, by some general rebelling, by a misunderstanding, a false alarm, and it hasn't happened yet. But, the more you think about it, it's frightening how all these elements could happen.
Yeah, it's just like having a vial of deadly plague sitting in the windowsill. It could fall over and spill, or something could happen. The whole world could be dead.
Hmm.
And these kinds of risks are so irrational, it makes you wonder if people have any sense.
Two movies I mentioned before that people should see if they haven't over the years. Doctor Strangelove is one of them, and Failsafe is the other. Strangelove is a parody on the type of thing we're talking about, and Failsafe is a drama of how it could happen by mistake and what happens then. So again, the two movies that really were predictive of what could very well happen, and surprisingly, it hasn't happened yet. Paul Craig Roberts, thanks once again for being with us, and we'll be talking more, I guess, after the meeting on Monday and see what the fallout is there. Paul, thank you.
Okay, Larry, I look forward to another conversation.